Hi, everyone. On today's episode of Hollywood Rants, we're going to be talking about the Academy Awards. And I know it's an old and tired subject, but today we're going to talk about the Oscar winners that we hate and why. And as well as talk about some of the other nominees that might have been up that year and why we think the particular movie that we happen to dislike definitely did not deserve to win. So I'd like to start off by introducing one of our new members. Charles, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. My name is Charles Unger. I'm an independent filmmaker. I've directed 3 features. I also part of the Editors Guild, so it's kind of my day job. And I teach, and I enjoy teaching whenever I get a chance. So happy to be here.
And Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Greene, and I teach a lot of the programs in the Adobe suite, including graphics and motion graphics programs at various colleges, plus through some of the film guilds. USC grad. Have to throw it in there.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm an independent producer and I work in production finance.
Jonathan.
My name is Jonathan Arnold. I'm both a professor at Valley College and a practicing attorney in entertainment law. Most of my clients are in the entertainment business. And undergraduate, graduate of SC, go Trojans, and studied law at a little school in the British countryside called Oxford.
Cindy.
Oh, hi, I'm Cindy Waite, and although I write, I support myself by doing academic advisement at USC.
Denise.
Hi, I've mostly been an administrative assistant. I've been working a lot of years in themed entertainment, which is Universal Studios, Disneyland, Hollywood, places like that, in the robotics field. I've also worked for an independent production company that does corporate videos, and I also worked for J.L. Fisher, which does camera support, renting and leasing.
Addison.
I'm I'm part of the old guard in Hollywood. I was born to the one of the big stars at Republic Studios, a gentleman by the name of Bob Livingston, and I have the dubious honor sometimes of being Hal Roach's grandson. I've been an actor, I've been a producer, I've been a director. And now I'm just, oh, that's true. Yes, I have written with this lovely lady several times. We have produced some of our own shorts. So thank you very much, Dan, for including me, and I appreciate it.
I wanted to ask you a brief question before we started, and that is, can you tell us a little bit about your brief time at PM Entertainment?
PM Entertainment, they were the Republic Studios of their time. I spent, I don't know, 4 or 5 years there. And I was lucky enough to be an in-house director. They basically gave me the same education that I would have gotten someplace like USC, but I got paid to do it. And they were right on the cutting edge of the video market. So they were always one step ahead. Everybody else was trying to catch up. They had the market almost locked. They started off being 2 guys, one of them being a pizza salesman, the other one being a DP. They got together. We did lots of action films. We were turning them out, about once or twice a month. And then when they finally decided to get out of the business, they took their little company and sold it for $65 million to Harvey.
Nice. Now, you're the first person that I want to ask this question to. Of all the movies that have won an Academy Award for Best Picture, which one do you feel deserved it the least?
I guess I would say Moonlight. I'm an action guy. You know, it's dull. I'm not somebody you can sit down and tell a slow story to. I'm not going to like it. And to be perfectly honest, I disliked it so much I couldn't tell you anything about it. I just put it out of my mind. So that would be my choice. There are a lot of different choices. There are a lot of choices that I have not seen that I would like to see just for that reason. Is like, okay, they won. Did they deserve it? Some of them, some of them did. A lot of them did, especially in the early days when they were being, when it was an honest contest back in the early days. Now it's a political game of, oh, look what we can do, and we're going to be good to you, but we're not going to be good to you. Sometimes I get the feeling that the Oscars, the people of the Oscars, enjoy their power and like to wave it around.
Yep.
So,
Anyone like Moonlight?
I thought as a character study and as an actor's showpiece, it was absolutely terrific. I mean, one of the problems that people have with films nowadays is we're also used to the big summer showcase, the enormous action film. Even if we don't respect it, we still look at those films as being what films are, a big dramatic crash of a movie. And watching films that are essentially character studies, which, if you think about it, are what a lot of Joan Crawford and Bette Davis and Barbara Stanwyck films are. The plots of many of them are not what hold you so much as the personalities of the people involved. But we've gotten to where we see films like that as being almost like TV movies, because we expect on the big screen something to use that screen to dazzle us. And it's not as easy to be dazzled by performance as compared to spectacle. So, that's why people will talk about, I love the Lord of the Rings films like everybody else, but people will talk about them, whereas a smaller film, like in the past, say Fried Green Tomatoes or Moonlight or any of these films that are based on the personalities of the people, except in rare occasions, get kind of buried because people think of them as something they would see on Lifetime or some other cable network, not a feature. They expect a feature to be spectacle, and that's why I love watching Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because it manages to be a brilliant character study, but it also has a huge amount of spectacle in it. It's got the fireworks it needs to hold people's attention, but at the same time,
Of course, it costs more money to make than The Longest Day.
Yes. But it's still an intimate character study. It's a study of four people interacting, which if you tried to sell that to a studio today, they'd say, okay, we can do direct cable, that it just doesn't seem like something that people would think of as being a big hit, even though it was. People expect something that's visually more engaging, even though it's spectacularly shot. It's an amazing film to look at. People don't think of it in those terms. They think of it in terms of four people interacting. And that has become less common, in a lot of popular filmmaking. That's what was so surprising, I thought, about Parasite winning. I was very pleased that Parasite won. Cindy and I saw it. And it not only was it terrifically acted and written, but there was a whole lot of subtext to it that I wasn't aware of going in, and Cindy researched it and found some of the things that were actually going on in the film we were unaware of. That, for instance, the desperate family in it had been middle class and had invested in things that in South Korea were temporary fads that became very popular and then crashed. There was a chicken place and then a dessert place, a certain kind of cake. And that comes out in their dialogue. But if it doesn't get translated, you have no idea what you're being told, that these people had actually been okay and been stable and reasonably successful. And they were engaged in these popular, successful businesses and then lost everything. And so the way
along with millions of others in the same boat.
What we see is the aftermath And if you don't know that history in South Korea and dialogue is not translated, and it wasn't, there wasn't really much hint of it on screen, you have no idea what you're actually watching. But once you know that, you realize it was actually a terrific film. It was a smaller film.
There's a problem. It was a smaller film. It was also a foreign film, and it beat out Joker. And I was incensed. I really was. The performance that was given, his performance, you could have almost seamlessly slid Joker right behind Dark Knight and made it one very long picture, and you would have believed that the Joker in Dark Knight was the same Joker you saw in the early picture. We don't even want to think about the brilliance of that performance, but I didn't understand what kind of political thing was being played out. Oh, it's a foreign film. It's a foreign film. Give it best foreign film.
Which it did. Yeah, it won best foreign.
It won best. Yeah, it won. It didn't it?
Really?
And,
can we divide up the awards a little bit better than that?
Yeah, it's like they wanted to make. I don't know what kind of a statement they were making, but and I honestly did not see Parasite, but everybody I've talked to said I didn't get it, and that brilliant performance. I don't know.
Going back to Moonlight, the thing that I really hate about Moonlight, and I'm bringing it up because I think it's an important point, is that it glorifies victimization. You have a young child, following this young child through his life, who creates a relationship with a drug dealer and then leaves because as soon as he finds out this guy is a drug dealer. This is a path he does not want to go on. And as far as you see it, he is a good kid. And he has this one homosexual experience. And with this kid he's grown up with, his best friend, and his best friend, the very next day, he turns on him and essentially ruins his life. So when you see this kid as an adult, he has become the very thing he never wanted to be because of this one turning point in his life that his best friend could have saved him from had he defended him. But no, the best friend went with the people who were against him. So you see this guy who has become everything he did not want to be when he was a child. He finds this guy and he goes to this guy at his business, and this guy's doing great. He's got a family, he's got his own business and everything else. And our main character, who has become what he never wanted to be, takes this guy back. And at the very end, it is almost the profession of, professes his love for this guy. And as I mentioned to Dan once, had this been a heterosexual woman and a similar betrayal by a lover, people would have been screaming at the screen, why are you taking this guy back? He ruined your life. So he basically becomes a total victim by, not even mentioning, hey, you know what? You could have stood up for me. You could have said, well, how this happened. You joined them. You became one of them. And now my life is everything I never wanted it to be. Go fuck yourself. But no, he takes him back, embraces him with all the love he has in his heart. And to me, that is just glorifying victimization. And that is why I hate Moonlight. It's not a badly wrought film as far as filmmaking goes. But that theme, love conquers all. Yeah, maybe love should conquer all.
I think
my issue with Moonlight, is that it follows the Academy's trend of having movies that are instant virtue signals, that they're movies that are instantly there because they're about someone who was downtrodden and victimized. My problem with both that film and Brokeback Mountain is that even though they have very, very impressive things and they really show the plight of what gay men went through in the past, what they're also doing is they're also reinforcing very negative stereotypes. And I know this is a controversial thing to say, especially about Brokeback Mountain, but Brokeback Mountain contains every single negative gay stereotype that you would see in other films. You have guys who are promiscuous, guys who marry women just because they want to pass, guys who run away from their children and responsibility. Someone becomes really promiscuous and gets gay bashed and killed. Someone goes after somebody else and turns them. It's like a compendium of real negative gay stereotypes compiled into one film. And within Moonlight, I felt it did the same general thing. I think Scott's point is well taken, that it's beautifully made, it's really well written, it's a great chamber play. But then when it wins Best Picture, it suddenly gets the okay to once again, now we're stacking brutalizations. We stack being Black, we stack being gay. And now we have a gay Black person who's treated really badly and destroyed by white society. It becomes poor little Nell being chased by the bloodhounds. It becomes really melodramatic and very disconnected from delving into the human emotion side. I have the same problem with a lot of the other Best Pictures that won on things like that, or performances such as Jane Wyman and Johnny Belinda, or you know, whenever or Rain Man, or something like that, where you have a showy performance, or the ones about alcoholics who stay on their destructive paths, whether it be the original ending of Ray Milland in The Lost Weekend or Nicolas Cage in Leaving Las Vegas. They're meretricious as opposed to being meritous.
Well, that brings up my two least favorites, or at least among recent film. I say recent, they're not really recent.
It doesn't have to be recent, by the way.
Yeah, the two I was going to bring up, one, which also brings up the whole victimization idea, plus is simply like a terrible parody of a Stanley Kramer film, is Crash, which was the one that won against Brokeback Mountain, and is like watching a sort of preachy TV movie that makes you want to throw your coffee cup at the TV screen, because, or theatrical screen, because it's so preachy and condescending and phony in its politics, and the characters are so broadly playing types that it's practically a parody of itself. It's really hard to sit through. And to bring up Denise's comment about Love Conquers All, I would also bring up The English Patient, which, as you pointed out, Dan, is about a guy who, in order to rescue a corpse, is willing to betray, you know, his country, his people, whatever battles they're going through, but he's got to get the corpse of the dead lover. I mean, you know, it's both of them have phony morals and phony ethics, and they're designed to get people to like them for reasons that don't seem valid at all. There's actually an episode of Seinfeld in which Elaine is stigmatized because she hates English Patient.
Yeah, and they do the same for Schindler's List in Seinfeld. But in The English Patient, there is the plot point where he is trying to get back at the beginning. He leaves her because he's going to get help, and then he gets captured, and then obviously she's going to die. So he knows that, and that adds to his tragedy because he can't get back to her, and she is going to die in the cave.
Right. Yeah, I'm in violent agreement with you all about the loathing of The English Patient. I felt like the acting, especially the lead, was, you know, I felt a lot of people were watching going, well, it's British, it must be good by definition. I was like, But the other thing, you know, I know we're recording, so I won't say the full thing, but it was sort of, I almost expected the male lead to turn right to the camera and say, you know, F me, I'm so sensitive. I mean, it just, and you know the phrase, and it's just, you know, it's from the F me, I'm so sensitive school of acting that I just wanted to, it was the visual equivalent to me of listening to easy listening music from the mid-1970s. I mean, I felt like I was watching a British version of the America band song Horse with No Name for 1 hour and umpteen effing minutes. And Scott, I would have happily chucked my mug at whatever whatever display I was watching this, because everybody's all, it's so good, and I'm like, it's crap. Sorry.
Well, what's also is, I'm looking at the list, it won over Fargo and Jerry Maguire, both of which are far superior films.
Yeah, good point.
Well, once again, this goes to should that be considered a foreign film? And should foreign films be part of the Academy Awards Best Picture pool? So that brings up the earlier discussion. Legitimately, you could say English Patient is a foreign film.
The Academy would have been in violent agreement with you in 1948 because that was the year Hamlet won Best Picture. And there were a lot of people in Hollywood who protested it and said the Academy Awards are for a celebration of American movies, not British films. Fortunately, they didn't make that a rule, but sometimes you look at some of their choices and you go, because by the way, I didn't like Parasite. As the token Asian here, I'm going to say that as an Asian, Parasite is a typical TV movie. It's got a little bit of pretense in it, but to me, it was like watching Ring, the original version of Ring, where it's superficially really impressive because we're not used to seeing that type of movie. But it's a family drama with some Twilight Zone-ish elements and a very strange ending, but it's not really beyond that. And so that was my reason for not liking Parasite. But I know that's a just Dan reason. But that, going back to it, that the Academy has always had a bias against non-Hollywood product for that very reason. And unless the US company was very heavily involved in the production and distribution.
Well, now they seem to be embracing foreign films as qualified to be in the Best Picture, but I think should be not allowed. As rightly said, it's a celebration of American movies.
I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong again, but the English Oscar, I can't remember what it's called.
The BFAs.
Are American films up for their Best Picture?
You know what? I'm going to say yes, but I don't think. I think like the Academy Awards, and this is me saying it without looking it up. That the British Film Awards, like the American Academy Awards, don't necessarily go outside of their own country unless there's something that's really, really outstanding, which I understand because it's local and most movies are taken in by local populations as being very local. The only reason American movies are so hegemonic is because making movies is so expensive. And for most other countries, movies don't cross borders. Trust me, if you have a movie that's made in Germany, it's not going to necessarily play well in France. There's still memories of World War II that are going on there. There's still tensions because of what's happening in the EU at any given moment. So there is that hesitation where American movies at least are generic, and they tend to have much better flying glass, no brain special effects.
Well, I'm looking at nominations from BAFTA, and it seems that American movies are in the nomination pool for best pitch, for best film. But I think that this goes to point to Dan's point that American movies are hegemonic.
So Brooke, what's your least favorite movie?
Well, I'm going to go with something more recent. I do have ones in the past, but I think the more recent one, I would say Shakespeare in Love.
Yep.
That was really bad.
The Harvey Weinstein
Good choice.
orchestrated win.
Yeah.
And that year, the other choices were Elizabeth, which is a great movie. Life is Beautiful, Saving Private Ryan, and The Thin Red Line. So I think I did see Private Ryan that year. I saw all those movies. I do think that Private Ryan perhaps would have been the better choice, because in terms of the epic quality of it, it's a great story. It's the execution is amazing, and it really is a throwback to the Hollywood epics and spectacles of the past, like Ben-Hur or Cleopatra and the like. And I think second, I would have said Elizabeth, once again, because that's such because of its epic quality and the amazing performance by Cate Blanchett and the spectacle of it all. I mean, these are the type of things that you used to have to go to a theater to see. I mean, now with streaming and the way that the industry's shaking out, all this stuff is available to you on your television set through the stream. So it's not making the movie experience unique. But seeing Saving Private Ryan, I saw it at the Chinese, on the big screen at the Chinese, and it truly was a film experience. You really felt like you were landing there at D-Day, the way that it was shot and edited. So I would say that's my picture. I would say didn't necessarily deserve, but Harvey Weinstein by that time had perfected his Oscar machine of manufacturing wins, so it won.
I always thought something interesting about Harvey Weinstein's movie-making, Academy Award-winning generating machine was that it did help the movie's box office a little bit, but not as much as you would have thought. Because as much as Shakespeare in Love probably shouldn't have made any money at all, it wasn't necessarily a chart buster under Harvey Weinstein either. It was still a movie that was very much a bonnets and carriages film where a lot of people were turned off by it because it looked boring, because it was boring.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Has anyone watched that recently? It's really, really bad.
Yeah. It's funny, you can see what films, by looking at this list, stood the test of time. You go back to Saving Private Ryan. I actually showed clips from it in my class, but nobody ever goes back to these other films, and that's kind of the barometer for saying what should have won and what didn't. The only light at the end of this tunnel is that it was interesting because in Shakespeare in Love, it was basically Miramax, and Saving Private Ryan was DreamWorks. But then in the next year, they reversed it and won. So DreamWorks won for American Beauty, and Harvey Weinstein took Cider House Rules and went home empty-handed. So, that was the only good thing. But I always feel that Spielberg got robbed.
Yeah, he totally got robbed that year. And well, in '99, you're saying American Beauty. Was American Beauty the actual movie that should have won? I would say no. I think there were other movies that were better that year.
By the way, the whole reason we're doing this is because there was an article that Scott sent me that talked about how American Beauty at its 20-year anniversary looks especially bad amongst all the movies that were nominated that year.
Yeah.
And it kind of is. It's kind of part of that same creepy set of films that includes Ordinary People and Kramer versus Kramer and Terms of Endearment that all bash woman in the most extreme way.
Ordinary People was on my list. Kramer versus Kramer was on my list. I do have a rant about the honorary Oscar, if I can interject, or if you want to come back to me after everyone has.
No, please do the rant now.
Okay. Well, I was really upset, and I still am upset at 1989 when the newer members, the younger members of the Academy, so that would have been, Spielberg and Lucas and Coppola, those types, giving the honorary Oscar to Kurosawa. He'd already gotten his Oscar for Best Picture for Rashomon. And yes, he deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award and all of that. But I really think that if they were going to honor someone that year, that they should have honored Irene Dunne with an honorary Oscar, because she was nominated a million times, never won anything. She's one of the great actresses of the golden age of Hollywood, starting in Silence, going right through the talkies. And she worked in all genres, from the the melodrama, the musicals, comedy. It was in numerous fantastic movies, and some of her movies were even nominated for Best Picture that she was in. Worked well with, had that great partnership with Cary Grant. And I just think that Hollywood should have been looking to itself and its community as who of the people, the elders, because obviously they were seeing that Kurosawa was old and wasn't going to be around long. But there's plenty of people in Hollywood that were part of building this industry that should have been recognized for their contributions. And I really think Irene Dunne should have been awarded. And if they had to give something to Kurosawa, fine. But also they should have had another award that year for Irene Dunne.
I'll tell you one of the reasons why they gave it to Kurosawa. First of all, they knew he was about to die. And yes, secondly, exactly. It happened to be on his birthday, and they thought that would be cute. Thirdly, and this is the part that a lot of times people don't consider, and that is the person that they want to give the honorary award to, they want that person there. And it might have been that Irene Dunne couldn't be there. It's the same with Lifetime Achievement Awards that the AFI does. They won't, first of all, they make sure that the person's a ratings getter. And secondly, they make sure the person can actually be there, because otherwise it makes no sense to give it to them.
I totally understand that. And I don't know what the nature of her health was at that moment of time. She died not too long, a year or so afterwards. But at least if Kurosawa could have shown up, they could have also given a secondary honorary Oscar to Irene Dunne, showed a little montage of how fabulous she is. It would have been paying tribute to someone of Hollywood. And let's celebrate Kurosawa. I'm not saying Kurosawa doesn't deserve an honorary Oscar. He's a master and influenced all of those directors I named and many others. But my beef is they consistently ignore Hollywood.
I'm going to agree with you on that one. Because remember, they also gave an honorary award to Satyajit Ray right about the same time. But it was for the same reason, that they got word that he was not long for the world, and they wanted to kind of get that in there, because that does also help with the Academy Awards being broadcast internationally.
Right.
Because that's part of their international appeal. And that by the way, that part of it has kind of gone away. I think that the Oscars, in terms of their foreign telecast, have actually decreased quite substantially in the past 15 years. They'll do highlight reels, but in terms of a simultaneous telecast, I think it's really gone down.
Well, a lot of the shows themselves have been incredibly painful to sit through.
Yeah, painful, and the movies nominated or no one cares about.
Exactly. I mean, I was reading the other day, somebody was mentioning about Rita Moreno being one of the first people to get the EGOT status, so the Emmy, the Grammy, the Oscar, and the Tony. And it had mentioned the person who was the first person to get that. And I realized it was someone whose name I hadn't thought of in years. And that is that lack of memory that you were talking about people forgetting someone if they're not in the immediate public eye right now. And it was Helen Hayes.
Yes.
And when was the last time any of us thought about a Helen Hayes or saw a Helen Hayes film or remembered anything about, and also an incredible career in that it seems for a lot of performers, once they're kind of in the distance and a little bit forgotten, they become totally ignored.
Oh, but who could forget that Helen Hayes and Betty Davis got into this epic battle when they were doing that Miss Marple movie together, to the point where they where both of them were kind of happy they never had to see each other again. It was the first time they worked together, and they were like happy they never had to do it again. But Hayes at least won 2 Oscars. She won for Airport and, of course, Sins of Madeline Claudette, which is unwatchable these days.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's interesting though, because again, it relates to that thing about certain people being marked off as forgotten or we can ignore them. One of my least favorite Oscar winners is Titanic, and it's going to be remembered because it was a landmark in special effects. I think the script is terrible. I'd much rather watch A Night to Remember or one of the other Titanic films. And that year, LA Confidential, which I think is a terrific script and terrifically acted, beautifully filmed, that should have won. And unless you're talking to film people, who remembers that? You can't mention that to a student, and unless they're our age, and have them remember it. But that's a great film.
I think that movie didn't win because it was considered a box office failure. So they gave it a consolation prize of Kim Basinger. Right. But that one, I think if it had been a bigger hit, it probably would have taken home the big prize. Yeah. Because I don't think Hollywood in general liked Titanic. They loved the money from it. Yeah. And the fact that like Gone with the Wind, that it was a huge gamble because it was so much money. And there was so much bad publicity during its production, and then it wins. Then it's a wide-ranging hit. Mm-hmm. So,
but don't you think that this could create an interesting response? The Oscars, at least now, are paid for. Whoever has the most money gets the Oscar. I mean, if it's not money in the box office, it's money in the back office. They're no longer what they were supposed to be when they first started, which was Hollywood honoring Hollywood. Now it's Hollywood buying itself a pretty little gold statue. The originality of the Oscars, really, in my mind, just doesn't exist anymore. My dad was one of the I don't know whatever happened to him. It breaks my heart when I think of it. But he got one of the B when the Oscars were still offering them. They had Oscars for the B pictures, and they were little Oscars standing with their arm around a film, but it was for the B pictures. I don't think they ever made a big deal out of it. But you don't see that anymore. They don't do that anymore. They're too busy trying to get the number of people in the seats so that they can sell it to to the sponsors. Why the Oscars exist has changed so much that it's a little difficult to see how they even pick them anymore. I mean,
it's always been the same. It was original. The Academy Awards originally came out because they were trying to stop the unionization of Hollywood. And so the producers got together and said, let's come up with this publicity stunt. And it happened to work. And it happened to work better than anyone dreamed it would. And since the 1950s, when Shirley Booth was accepting her award for Comeback Little Sheba and almost tripped and fell over, it's been a television perennial ever since. Even one year when the show ended early and they all had to keep singing choruses of Hooray for Hollywood because they were 10 minutes short. But it's been a TV event since then, which was the 1950s. And so a lot of it is populist. And remember, in the 60s, there was a big problem because you had Dr. Dolittle being nominated for Best Picture simply on the strength of 20th Century Fox throwing the best parties because they were so desperate to get another Best Picture because Dr. Dolittle represented such a potential loss for them. And it got a nomination for Best Picture and it won for Talk to the Animals. And I mean, thank God In the Heat of the Night came along and took that award. But it's it's always been a political battle. And my sense is that if you really want to understand the Academy Awards, it's better to think of them as the pettiness awards and figure out who is being punished in a particular year. And when you figure out who is being punished, then the awards make sense. For example, Gandhi's win was because they had to punish Spielberg because Spielberg was too young and he was an upstart, and here he is making E.T. Now, I happen to not like E.T., but that doesn't matter. This was a punished Spielberg award.
They punished him actually a couple of times.
Several times, yes.
Yeah, he lost in Jaws.
Well, that was one for Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and
yeah,
and
that was a good film.
That's not one that I think people argue about too much.
No, that's not one. But on your point, Dan, earlier about the honorary awards and how important it is for the recipient to be there, I wanted to chime in on this, which is now up to 78, when their Academy Awards, it was known that Woody Allen never showed up to the awards. That he didn't think that this is Hollywood. He didn't care anything about that. But yet they still gave it to him, and he wasn't there. He was playing clarinet. And I love, Annie Hall. I think it's great. But I this brings up another issue. It's like, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I think Star Wars should have won, and I know I'm going to get some crap for that, but it was a huge spectacle. It had a really important message. It spoke to people, and I know I'm going to get crap for this too, but I love Titanic. I think you can't discount that people responded to an emotional movie and had an experience, whether it be 15-year-old girls or 60-year-old men. If people go back to see a movie, it says something. And so anytime somebody discounts a movie that speaks to the public, I don't think it looks good. Because
by the way, Charles, going back to Star Wars not winning Best Picture, Annie Hall won that year. So do you think that Annie Hall holds up better than Star? I mean, this is a brutal question, but
yeah, no, it's a really good point. It's the larger point I was trying to make is that, do we nominate small films or do we nominate spectacles? Do we have the same thing? Should they be in the same category? Annie Hall I liked. I think it's the best romantic comedy ever. And so many films have ripped it off. And I go back to it, but it's a small little cute romantic film. It's a world changer, a game changer that Star Wars was. Now they punished Lucas in that year, just as they punished Spielberg for 82. So I can't say that I hate Annie Hall. So that probably is not the one that I wanted to address. But going back to Kramer and Kramer, now look what was up against. All That Jazz lost, Apocalypse Now lost. And those are great, I would argue, not only spectacle films, but personal films, where you really understand the character. We're always talking apples and oranges. Oh, you can't have a good epic with the character study, but I argue you can have both. And both of those films lost to Kramer versus Kramer.
I agree with you that it's possible to have both. It's just, remember, with Star Wars, you're coming off a time period that had extreme prejudice against sci-fi, except for 2001.
Which did make a lot of money, yeah.
Right. I mean, that film was considered respectable enough to be sci-fi. You get an award, but if you look at Star Wars, it fell into the same problem that fantasy films fell into, really until Return of the King, as far as I know, where, films that fall into certain genres are considered to be reward enough. And the thing about Titanic, for me, I don't discount people's emotional response, but the same with their emotional response to E.T. It's just the box office itself can be the reward that people making a very emotional film can get. I like to think that the awards go to what is actually genuinely the film that will stand the test of time. But of course, that's a fantasy. That's not true at all. But in terms of script performance.
Also in 1968, when 2001 won, I think that's another really bad year because Oliver won Best Picture.
Yes,
You notice that whenever a musical wins Best Picture, it tends to be a bad musical. Whether it be American in Paris or Gigi or In Its Own Way, My Fair Lady, and I like Sound of Music, but or Chicago. or Broadway Melody. These are all not great musicals, and they're the ones that win Best Picture.
What about Cabaret? Did I get Best Picture? I'm trying to
No,
remember.
that one, Cabaret was the year The Godfather won Best Picture, but Cabaret took home 8 of the Oscars that year.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. The late 60s and all the way up to the 70s was a changing of the guard. You know, all these great films, you know, like Bonnie and Clyde came out and The Graduate came out, and, you know, Hollywood wasn't ready for it. But I wanted to address the feel-good thing of Star Wars. And what I noticed in the movies is that, you know, I love the new Hollywood, you know, the dark 70s, you know, The Godfather and all these Midnight Cowboy and Taxi Driver. But I noticed a shift, and that shift didn't happen with Star Wars. The shift happened with the Rocky. Rocky was a surprise hit. No one expected that thing to out Taxi Driver or Network. And that was, and I, you know, I love all those films, or President's Men. You know, that was a huge upset, but what it signified was that the country was changing, and they were tired of Vietnam and you know, the Kennedy assassination and Watergate. They wanted to feel good, and I think Rocky was the first film that changed that. And then Annie Hall, I mean, same thing as Star Wars. It was just a positive thing that people were ready for a change.
Well, remember,
here's the thing about Rocky. When you look at Rocky, one of the nice things about it is that it's almost a neo-realist film. When you go into his apartment, when he has that romantic scene with Talia Shire and his brother's song is playing on the radio in the background, you see a gritty apartment. There is nothing pretty about it. There's nothing prettified about Rocky. So when we see it today, it looks really different from the way it looked in the 1970s.
Yeah, it was a great character study. That's what I love. A film like a great character study film that is also kind of an epic human story, you know, did really well.
Did that take the writing award?
That one I'm not sure.
Did Rocky get the writing award? Because if you got Best Picture, you'd think, considering the guy that was starring in it, you'd think that since he wrote it, that it would have gone to, that he would have gotten Best Original Screenplay.
I think
I'm just wondering.
I'm guessing Network because of Patty Chayefsky.
I think
there you go again. He was a new kid. He was just nobody. Who is this Rocky kid that played? Nobody knew. So naturally, he comes out with a great film. But what does the Academy do? Once again, bless their hearts. Oh no, he can't write. No, he just wrote the Best Picture.
Yeah, exactly.
He can't write.
That's what I'm talking about. Is like, why can't we acknowledge the popular vote? Why can't we acknowledge that audiences respond? I hate this attitude that the Academy snubs their nose and says to the American public, you don't know what the best film is. We're going to tell you what the best film is. You know, I feel that attitude with a lot of these choices, you know, and I think going all the way up to last year, I'm just going to come out and I'll probably get hell for this too, but I hated No Man's Land. I couldn't even watch. We had to turn it off. I wanted to slit my wrist. I mean, you know, I think Hollywood, especially this time of you know, pandemic, should focus on what it should do, which is to entertain first, you know. And I thought McDormand's is a great actress. I'm not taking anything away from her. I think that the film just needed a structure or a character arc, something redeeming. And you know, we're sitting at home, we're dealing with pandemic, and I see this woman's life, and I'm sorry. I know I'm supposed to be sympathetic, but I want to go to movies to escape sometimes. And I think Hollywood says, no, we're going to tell you what great art is. So
that ties in very well with. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say that ties in very well with what you were saying about Rocky, because in 1977 you had OPEC and the gas crisis. You had all of the things happening in the Middle East, plus you had a lot of people whose work was more at the beginning in comparison to what happened later. There was a loss of a lot of jobs. There was a loss of a lot of status in manufacturing. And so Rocky was very well written to appeal to people who wanted to have a feel-good movie, but he was extremely as a writer, and that he made it realistic. The later Rocky films are more like triumph for triumph's sake, whereas here it really seems earned.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the difference between good writing and just.
It holds up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the point Addison made. You know, by way of disclosure, my dad was a full voting member of the Academy back in the day, and also some of the technical awards. I'd be the first to say that the Academy Awards system has never been perfect. And I do believe it's about entertainment, but one of the changes that I saw was pressure brought to bear too much by Hollywood. Because one of the things that I liked about the Academy Awards is that it was sort of a peer-reviewed system. So it was the people who were making these movies, the things that they liked. And it seemed there was kind of there's always been marketing and behind the proverbial potted palm stuff. But you had people in the business recognizing other people in the business who seemed to execute on whatever the vision was. And it seemed more often that a lot of this stuff aligned with what the public liked also, because it is entertainment and the entertainment business at the end of the day. But then I saw the morphing of it, and there's a lot of stuff I can't mention because I was working in legal aspects of marketing, or like say I was serving time at Paramount Pictures during the time of Forrest Gump and also Braveheart. And Charles, I may have to take refuge where you live. I cannot stand Forrest Gump. It makes me want to retch. It feels like brain candy. It's for people. I mean, and it got a lot of buzz. The novel, because people were going, "Oh, it's this generation's Jonathan Livingston Seagull," and I was like, "Yeah, that book sucked too," But it was but it became so this, and I can't get into too many details, but I can tell you that this strange buzz started to occur around it. Because it was, when you take a step back, again, there's certain things I can't mention. It's like, it's missing a cue card. Applaud here, cry here, have a memory here when they show you an early pair, say, of Nike Cortez Classics. And, guilty, I used to wear those a lot, but it's just, it was so programmatic. And that point you made about Rocky during the time period, and it resonated well. To me, Rocky felt like that intersection of public taste and the peer review system at the Academy Awards, at least I think were intended to be, but among all the other things like Dan mentioned, it got to be, it's such a point where, that was good. It felt almost to me like Italian neorealism, but done in America with the Horatio Alger myth.
Yeah.
But that you could also believe that this wasn't just a mythological character.
No, it was based in reality.
You're based in reality. For example, that Rocky works as kind of a, how should we say, a collections agent for the mob.
Yeah.
I don't know if I remember this correctly. It's like his cousin or brother is like the mobster, but it even shows you closer to like how far the mafia had fallen when you see that guy too in his kind of crappy Lincoln car. So it was very believable, and at the same time, very well done. And I remember something that my dad said, who, by the way, worked on In the Heat of the Night. He said, the one good thing about the Academy Awards is, he said, us who all work in the industry can recognize something, and it would boost its box office revenue, but can recognize something that we thought was well done no matter what the genre was. So, and one other thing, I just wanted to point this out. Dan and I have been quipping about variety, those little rhyming quips. I would go a step further and actually saying about Spielberg, who it was against. And I think it was more, if there had been a variety headline for Spielberg not winning several times, it would have just said, "Screw you, Lou," for Lou Wasserman, because Spielberg was one of his proteges. And Wasserman still wielded power then, but kind of a lot of people were realizing he ain't the Pope of Hollywood anymore, and we're tired of chafing at this sort of stuff, and just, it's sort of hitting the mafia associate if you can't hit the mafia boss in that regard. So. But
Jonathan,
what do I know?
Since we have you, what's your best picture that you hate?
Best picture that I hate. I'm trying to think of a current one, but I think Chicago. I think Richard Gere is a horrible actor. It's nothing personal. But I felt like sitting through that whole movie, it's like, this is what an Academy Award winning movie should look like. We made it just for that reason, and you like it, damn it. So it just, you know, and the thing that bugged me about Chicago is it was programmatic. It was, I felt like it was, Dan, as you said, production by PowerPoint, and that the people in it did have individual talent, but it's like when you combine them together, I felt like it was, at the end of the day, anti-talent. It's just, it was less than the sum of its parts. Also, I thought, you know, not for the emotional things, but I thought both the Gangs of New York, as violent as it was, and also The Pianist, were much better at hitting that core thing that used to be the hallmark of the Academy, which was kind of like, you like the genre, love the genre, hate the genre. Did they execute on the genre well? And Chicago, I just felt, was like Forrest Gump, was just a lot of very expensive, oily eye candy.
My sense of Chicago was really that they were trying to shock you with people who could actually sing. Renee Zellweger. Okay, Dan, what was her name? Michael Douglas's wife.
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Catherine Zeta-Jones, Richard Gere, Queen Latifah. So, wow, look, they can really sing. And it was giving me Camelot flashback. Yeah. And because of that, I was willing, and plus the visual style was robbed almost directly from Cabaret.
Yeah.
And it didn't improve on it. It was just a let's redo the look of Cabaret. Yeah. And I know that it again, it's one of the bad musicals that won Best Picture to me.
Yeah. I think like some of the movies are like actor vehicles. You know, they want to write, you know, they want to sing, they want to dance. And so they kind of drive the films. So it's not awarded on the film. It's just a bunch of actors wanting to, you know, steal the limelight.
Brings up one of my least favorite supporting actress things is when Penelope Cruz won over to Viola Davis and down. Because Viola Davis gives such a searing performance of a tortured mother, and nothing against Penelope Cruz. I like her, but she sang and she danced and she won the Academy Award. Mm-hmm. And I don't, as far as acting, and you know, nothing against her, but I think it's one of the least deserved Academy Awards in history.
Yeah.
Oh, Denise, what's your least favorite movie that won a Best
Picture? I have several. Even though I haven't seen it, I just think it's a travesty that Oliver won over Lion in Winter. I also think it's the next least travesty is Godfather 2 winning over Chinatown, because I don't think Godfather 2 overall is a very good film. And when I watched it last night, I think that $1 Million Baby doesn't hold a candle to The Aviator. So I'm more like, you know, were you on drugs kind of this, you know, kind of thing. I was not a fan of Moonlight. I really don't like No Country for Old Men. They should have, you know, manned up and given it to Fargo for those guys instead of just waiting another decade. You know, but
did you see Hidden Figures? Because I
yes,
love that film.
Yeah. I love that movie, and I think that should have won Best Picture for that year, because the others were like, what was it, La La Land and
Well, here's the thing about Hidden Figures, and Hollywood says it wants diversity, it wants female leads, and then you have a movie like Hidden Figures, which has diversity, female leads, true female empowerment, really good filmmaking,
and a good
made
script.
A bloody fortune. Where's the sequel?
Script.
And I don't mean Hidden Figures 2. I mean, where's the follow-up film that took those same elements and redid them? I mean, if Whatever Happened to Baby Jane can turn into Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, certainly Hidden Figures should have been able to turn into another movie that was like that, where it takes advantage of the fact that you have these three diva-like actresses in it who could very easily run an old school Hollywood female-centered audience pleaser melodrama. That was
certainly
always the
there's
bread and
enough-
butter of Hollywood, and here's a movie that proved it. It crossed over into all audiences in an immense way, and it's ignored. Instead of doing that, it's, oh, let's do Wrinkle in Time instead, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one where you watch the Oscars when they gave the Faye Dunaway and was it Warren Beatty? And that was the wrong winner. So that's why you watch the Oscars.
Yeah.
The Academy Award guy run out from
I
the
think that
win.
was done deliberately, by the way. I think it was done deliberately because first of all, Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway can't stand each other because no one can stand Faye Dunaway. And especially after she did Mommy Dearest. That's why people enjoyed Mommy Dearest's failure so much, because she was so difficult to work with. That and here you had it happen again. And I think that the Academy needed some kind of a jolt at the end so that people wouldn't notice that a movie that was very meretricious again was taking Best Picture. And yeah, La La Land's bad too. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I'm just looking, they also had Hell and High Water, which was a very good film, a small film.
Arrival, I thought, was a terrific film, but it's an emotionally cooler film, whereas Hidden Figures managed to hit that nexus between being incredibly intelligently written, well done, beautifully acted, popular, emotional, I loved Arrival. I would love to have seen it win, but Hidden Figures felt like it should have been an Oscar winner.
Yeah, in my mind, it was the best film
Yeah.
of that year.
Yeah.
It should have gotten Best Picture.
God, I've got to interject a hacky joke because it's what I do. I would say is a reference to Arrival. We're not bashing the Oscars. We're having an Oscar experience. Sorry, hacky joke. Almost so bad it's legally actionable, but give me.
So Charles, what movie do you think shouldn't have won Best Picture?
Well, I kind of think Nomadland, but then I have to be honest and say that I hadn't seen all the other films from last year. So I didn't, and I didn't even finish getting through Nomadland. But I would agree with a lot of the things that had already been said here. I don't think Moonlight should have won. I'm on the fence about, Star Wars and Annie Hall. I think that they're both great films, but I think, spectacle wise, again, going back to what I was saying, that, maybe Star Wars because it's, epic and, but yeah, the late 60s too, there was a bunch. I mean, I love The Graduate, and, that didn't, so.
No, but that was In the Heat of the Night, which is arguably still good.
Right, which still holds up, I don't know. I don't see it referenced as much as the Graduate, but yeah, I get it, and yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, the 75 was a really tough one because you had, I know we were mentioning this earlier, Godfather 2 and Chinatown and The Conversation and Lenny. Those are all great films.
And The Towering Inferno, let's not forget that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mention that one, but yeah, The Conversations. I mean, the fact that Coppola had 2 films in 1 year, which is amazing. The only other person that's done that, to my knowledge, was Steven Soderbergh with Traffic and what was that one with Julia Roberts?
Aaron Brockovich.
Aaron Brockovich. Yeah. So I, that. It's weird. I look at this list and I think there's some years there's a lot of great films, and and then there's other lists, other years where there's hardly any, and you're picking from like very little, So okay, so the other thing was, and nobody's talked about this one, but I liked The Sting that won in '74, and here I go again on my broken record. But American Graffiti again was pretty good, and you had, The Exorcist too, which. They didn't like that horror film. They wouldn't nominate a horror film or a thriller, I guess, until Silence of the Lambs, which is brilliant, in my opinion. But yeah, I like The Sting, but was it in an Academy Award film? I think they gave it, here's a lot of other things that happened. They gave it as a consolation prize because Butch Cassidy was an awesome film 4 years before it and maybe should have won. So a lot of times it's like, oh, we can't give it to you this time, but we'll give it to you later. And I also wanted to say that as far as the actors, if you look at Al Pacino or Paul Newman, they both had like 7 or 8 nominations before they finally won. And what they won for wasn't the best work of all. Scent of a Woman is a good film, but look at the others that Al was nominated for. And same thing with Paul Newman for winning with The Color of Money. He was a good role, but look at the other stuff that he's done too. So I think you always have to look at this list as like, okay, well, we're not going to give it to you this year because, you definitely, maybe you've got another one coming. And then sometimes that doesn't happen. I personally thought that going back to this most recent year, the one that I saw and most enjoyed was Mank, because it calls back to the old Hollywood, one of the greatest films ever, Citizen Kane. And I think David Fincher was long overdue for recognition, so that's kind of my beef too. And not that, the director that won wasn't, qualified, but, come on, David Fincher's been in the industry for a long time. And he's done a lot of great work. I mean, when are they going to give it to that guy? So that's kind of my 2 cents on that one. And Parasite, yeah, I just want to echo Addison's point. I think the Joker was brilliant. It was brilliant in a way because it wasn't a superhero movie or a villain story or whatever it was. It was a social commentary on depression and mental instability, which is a huge issue. And if they could have just seen that issue, if it had not been the Joker, if it had just been a guy dealing with mental issues, it probably would have won because the Academy likes that. But what they did with the Joker, which was brilliant, they dressed it up as an action superhero film so that people would go to see it. And I think, in my opinion, this is the last thing I'm going to say, but I think that's what Hollywood and art and filmmaking and entertainment should do, is have an entertaining film that says something really smart about the times we're in. And I thought Parasite was good. It was a little weird. The ending still didn't sit with me, but Joker should have won for the year before.
I can't bounce off of Charles about performances. I mean, having just watched it last night, Leonardo DiCaprio in The Aviator. I think that's the one he should have won the Academy Award for. He's absolutely brilliant in it. And like Charles says, it's an examination of mental illness and how much this poor guy suffered from mental illness. But again, opposite social commentary, because he had money. This was, if he'd been, somebody's Uncle Joe, they would have thrown him into at least into some kind of a hospital. But because he was rich and because so many of these people's jobs depended on him, it's like, let's put him in the back room. It's almost like a 19th century approach to mental illness. But yeah, DiCaprio was brilliant in that. I think he got it for Revenant just because he survived the shoot.
Yeah.
I gotta, Charles makes some very, very good points, but I'm probably on the complete other side of those arguments. I don't go to movies to see, deep thoughts. I mean, sometimes I end up seeing it, but I don't go to the movie for that. I go to the movie to be entertained and to be taken somewhere where I haven't been before.
Exactly.
And that was what early Hollywood was all about. It was about escapism. We had a thing called what was that thing where nobody had any money?
The Depression.
Yeah, that's it. We had this thing called the Depression, and it basically made the studios what they were, because the studios took people who were in god-awful situations and said, hey, you know what? There's a better place to go. Step inside our little church, and we'll take you places that you can't get to.
Exactly.
And the Academy has completely forgotten.
They've gone
completely. They well, is it deep? I don't care.
Right.
I don't care if it's deep. Did it entertain me? Did it take me where I want to go? I go there. I want to go to the land of Oz. Took me there.
Long way to go in a galaxy far, far away.
And so I guess I'm, even though my background says deep into Hollywood, I'm not that guy. I'm not somebody who's sitting there and gonna go, I gotta understand why the man did that because he didn't say that. He was talking to me. I don't know. And I just want to go somewhere where I can have a good time. I'm really dying to see what's going to happen to the business and to the theaters when they open everything back up again. It'll be very interesting to watch. Sorry, got on a soapbox.
Cindy, so what movie do you not like that won Best Picture?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, good, thanks. A couple of asides first. I liked Moonlight, but even if you hate it, it could have been so much worse. They could have given it to La La Land, and almost did. And I would just like to state for the record that I sat through La La Land in its entirety, and it was like a kind of torture. The other aside is I used to temp at Universal in the legal department, so I knew people who worked with Lou Wasserman. And do you know what he read for fun? Obsessively? Tax law. He loved tax law and he read it all the time. The other thing I want to say is that I never watched the Oscars until they honored Charles Chaplin. And for that, I was willing to sacrifice. And I sat down and I sat through hour after hour of schlock and cheese. And then they brought him on for 30 seconds. And I have never forgiven the Oscars for this. And it has never gotten any better. I think I'd like to put in a good word for Mrs. Miniver as being really bad. I just saw it on TV yesterday, and it was really hard to sit through. But there are so many. I did hate Titanic very much, and American Beauty, and so many others. But since I don't watch the Oscars, I don't even usually know who's being nominated.
Well, thank you, Cindy. Okay, well, thank you for bringing up Mrs. Miniver. Anyone here like Mrs. Miniver, by the way?
Never seen it.
So no one likes Mrs. Miniver. Okay, good. Well, you know, it's William Wyler, and I tend to love William Wyler movies, and I cannot stand Mrs. Miniver. It's very meretricious, and it's very it's very boring. Yeah. And it doesn't, sorry about that. I'm getting some kind of a warning on my thing. So it's a very, very problematic film. And I'm going to talk about an older movie, because I had a hard time deciding which movie was going to be my really, really bad film. And my initial instinct is to say Cavalcade or Broadway Melody, because those are both so unwatchable today. But the truth is, those were in the early days of sound, and they were dealing with a new technology, and so they had a little bit of a get out of jail free for that. On the other hand, in 1937, The Great Ziegfeld won Best Picture, and that's another bad musical. And the reason I picked The Great Ziegfeld over so many other films like Going My Way or Mrs. Miniver or some of those is simply because it was over 170 minutes. And it is just unbearable when you think that William Powell and Myrna Loy, who were co-stars in this, were at the same time doing Thin Man movies, and any one of those would have been better than this one. And I think that was the year that they did after the Thin Man, where you had Jimmy Stewart do a great insane scene at the end. And to see Jimmy Stewart be the villain was just such a joy, because you never really saw that until Hitchcock started playing him as this kind of nebbishy, morally compromised person. But The Great Ziegfeld follows the life of Flo Ziegfeld. And it's a nice compendium of big production numbers that are okay, but they're really unimpressive when we look at them today. Especially A Pretty Girl Is Like a Melody, which ends with Virginia Bruce sitting on top of this thing that looks like a failed wedding cake. And it follows Ziegfeld in the most perfunctory fashion. It's like watching the last half of Funny Girl for 3 hours. and there's no surprises to it. It also won Best Actress with Louise Rayner, who won for that and for playing Olan in The Good Earth, which is the worst yellow-faced performance of all time, by the way. It's really upsetting to watch that. Okay, Dragon Seed's a little bit worse. You know, Mickey Rooney is somewhat minorly cringy, but nothing compared to Louise Rayner as Olan, or Paul Muni as her husband. But The Great Ziegfeld won Louise Rayner a Best Actress award for a performance that's not very long. It's not as short. It was Louise Fletcher's win for Best Actress for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but it's still a short performance. And here's what was opposite the Great Ziegfeld. And I know a lot of people probably don't remember any of these movies, but I feel any one of them would have been a lot better. Okay, Anthony Adverse, which won Best Supporting Actress for Gail Sondergaard, not that good. But just like the book, which won a Pulitzer Prize a couple of years before Gone with the Wind, it's a forgotten book, it's a forgotten movie. Dodsworth is the one that I think should have won, because Dodsworth has a great Walter Brennan performance. It's fantastic with Mary Astor. It takes a weird look at a divorced couple, and you realize they never should have been married, but they've chosen to stay married just because he was a corporate lead. They go to Europe in the days before World War II is coming, and he gets to experience a life he's never had. It's a real good film that could stand to be remade. Dead End, which is another William Wyler picture. Oh, excuse me, Libel Lady, which is that the Dead End was the next year. Libel Lady, great screwball comedy with Jean Harlow and Spencer Tracy, and a great scene where Jean Harlow enters in a wedding dress, mad at Spencer Tracy because he's once again stood her up at the altar to follow a story. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. All right, then we have a really bad one that I would have thought was much worse than Great Ziegfeld if it won. It was the Romeo and Juliet, the retirement home version that had Norma Shearer and Lionel John Barrymore and Leslie Howard, all double the age of the hero and heroine. The other one that I wouldn't have mind seeing win was San Francisco, which is another big MGM film. And it has a fantastic earthquake scene that even today holds up and passes the test of time. Story of Louis Pasteur, okay, meretricious stuff, who cares? Tale of Two Cities, David Selznick adapting a classic novel. Comes out well, directed by George Cukor. Three Smart Girls, okay, it's Deanna Durbin, but in terms of at least enjoyable films, every one of those films is at least shorter than The Great Ziegfeld. So that's why I'm going to pick Great Ziegfeld as my worst Best Picture. Does anyone like it? Okay.
But I would bring up Going My Way as a worthy competitor, only because be Double Indemnity and Gaslight.
Yes. Okay. Going My Way is one I really hate too, but Going My Way is more than a half hour shorter than The Great Ziegfeld, and that's what nudged Great Ziegfeld over the edge. Because running time and torture really are part of this. When you see a movie like The English Patient, part of its badness is the fact that it doesn't end.
Yes.
Well, speaking of torture, did anybody make it through 3 hours of Gandhi?
I did.
Yes.
I mean, come on. We reference movies. Did we reference Gandhi? Does anybody talk about it?
No, but think about how Gandhi was coming at a time when you were having colonial revisionism, and it was playing at the same era as Passage to India and on TV, Jewel in the Crown. And so it was kind of in the cultural zeitgeist to re-question British colonialism. And in that, the problem with it is Richard Attenborough. And then Ben Kingsley's good enough in it. It's not bad. It's just that when you think of it opposite E.T. and it winning as a punishment to Spielberg, that's what makes it feel bad.
And there's also, I noticed too, with 1983, Tootsie, which I think is probably one of the greatest comedies next to
Something Like It Hot?
Something Like It Hot. Yeah, I think every time I go back to that movie, it's brilliant on so many levels. I mean, it's a screenplay textbook on and of course The Verdict, is also great. Another textbook example. Those two films people study in film class. That's I guess my gripe is that, look at the films that people are continually learning from and reference, and most of them did not win, but Gandhi did. And the last thing I want to say is, which kind of already mentioned earlier, was Ordinary People winning in 81. It's a good, it's a little drama. It's a deep drama, but Raging Bull is an epic. But I understand Raging Bull, it's a hard film to watch. So is Elephant Man. Those are hard films to watch, but they're both brilliantly done.
But think about how Mary Tyler Moore's performance in Ordinary People is much more over the top and ridiculous than Faye Dunaway and Mommy Dearest.
Yeah,
she that scene where she's in the kitchen and she takes the food off of Timothy Hutton's plate and throws it in the garbage, or the scene where she doesn't want to take a picture with him. It's comedic. You could put a laugh track on it and have those scenes make more sense.
And I just want to jump in and say that being a practicing attorney, I like The Verdict a lot, and this is just me talking, because a lot of the Paul Newman's character studies is kind of what a smaller tort personal injury lawyer would go through. It's not exactly it. I mean, it was dramatized, but it was also centered in realism, which I think made it believable for a lot of people. Now, there's that one scene which is like, I don't know, brain porn for especially personal injury attorneys, where the jury foreman is like, ask the judge, can we award more than the plaintiff is asking for? It's like, it was cute. But there was one of the little takeoffs though, but what he went through, the pressure to settle, seeing the intel, how much trial can be a gamble. And it's one of those things I think was done well, because an attorney would look at this, who's had any trial experience, and go, does give you a good flavor of what it's like. But even if you haven't gone through that, it was done so well that people, I think, could recognize the emotional aspect of it.
Yeah. That last crane shot when, he's giving his big speech is just flawless.
Yeah.
It's flawless. It's such a perfect textbook movie. I like movies. I go to movies, like Addison said, not only to be entertained, but I want to see a character change. And The Verdict is exactly that. If you look at from the beginning to the end, that guy is transformed, and it's enriching. I think that's why we like to go to movies. We want to see that we can change, that we could become better people.
Yeah.
I loved seeing a sort of more recent parallel, even though it's a little more ambiguous, with Spotlight, which I thought
good movie.
had
The great movie. That was great.
Superb script, beautifully written, beautifully realized also. I mean, this may have less appeal to younger people, but to actually see teletypes and fax machines and all of the things, that the research in hard copy that they had to go through, and the difficulty it took to actually accomplish what they were doing. It's one of those films where you see a group triumphing over evil at a time when the challenges to do it were something we've almost forgotten about. What was it like when, you couldn't just look up the information on the internet, or, it was just harder to get that. And their struggle to prove it and to get it in the court of public opinion as opposed to in a courtroom, I thought was fascinating. I loved that film.
Yeah, and I really like Spotlight too, from the way they approached it. Is that what I liked is that could have gotten so black hat versus white hat, very cardboard cutout. And they showed how the journalists were torn with this, and how some of the other people were torn. So it came across as very human.
Very like All the President's Men in some ways. There was
I like the fact that they packed it with some top flight actors who realized it was an ensemble piece, and they played it to an ensemble piece.
Michael Keaton.
I gotta wonder, going way back,
1953.
1953, there was a film that came out that starred one of the biggest stars in Hollywood at the time. He was brilliant in it for him. Did a great job. And that was John Wayne in The Quiet Man. And as far as I'm concerned, he should have gotten the Oscar for Best Actor in that film.
Mhm.
And what did they do? They Greatest Show on Earth wins. Hasigaza, Hasigaza, Hasigaza. You know, glitz and glamour. And you've got John Wayne actually acting
Yeah.
in a great story with Maureen O'Sullivan.
Mm.
Oh my God. And they give it to, I do not understand.
Oh,
mean,
no,
it's also-
they gave it to Greatest Show on Earth in order to not give it to High Noon. That and
there you
High
go.
Noon was so incredibly controversial that Howard Hawks remade it as Red River. I mean, Rio Bravo. So when you see that contention in Hollywood, that was an award to Cecil B. DeMille because he was the polar opposite of Fred Zinnemann and Stanley Kramer.
Mm.
So that was a screw you award to end no other screw you awards. And on that happy note, I want to thank everyone for joining us today on this. And I appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Dad.
Any final words?
Thanks.
I'd like to see them do the Oscars the way they do dog shows, best in group and then best in show. Because I think A Quiet Place deserved more attention than it got the year it came out.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because it does tend to transcend its genre and is a story about the people. And yet, again, why not have these categories, pick a best film for those categories and then, do one that you think is overall best. At least there are categories that do not get ignored, like science fiction, like horror.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, I think one way they could improve it is I understand that all the Academy members get to vote on all the awards. And, obviously SAG is the biggest union. So what I've noticed is that there's definitely an askewed view towards, the actor type film, centered actor, like that's why Ordinary People beat out Raging Bull, or, I think, or Shakespeare in Love beat out Saving Private Ryan. It's an actor's medium, and most of the Academy members are actors. So I guess my thing is, could the individual guilds just vote on their particular categories? And then, in my opinion, that might be a more accurate representation, because
The individual guilds vote for the nominees in their area, and then it opens up to the whole group.
right, but that's what I'm saying. I guess, when the Actors Guild is the biggest, SAG is the biggest guild, then the best picture usually reflects that.
Well, Dan, also, didn't you say that because the people who were voting for Best Picture are not even required to have seen it? I don't know if that's changed.
Oh, no, it's true. Most, in fact, when you're talking about a lot of the awards, they're not voted on by people who've seen it. They're voted on by their assistants and others, or you give it to your housekeeper because either you're really old, so you hate everything, like I or you go, and so you don't know what to vote for. You're out of step with what's au courant. So it actually makes sense for a lot of executives to hand the ballot to their assistants, because the assistants are much more likely to be really film passionate and to have at least seen everything and have seen it with new eyes, the eyes of the public at large, rather than through the filter of Hollywood's doing it all wrong nowadays. And yes, I'm guilty of that, I know. So anyone else have any final words? Okay, well, thank you all. And I look forward to doing this again with everyone soon.
Thank you,
Fun.
sir.
Thanks again.
Great seeing you all again.
Bye.
Yeah. Take care. Until next.
Thanks.
Thanks much.
Thanks.